Let's start this by putting you somewhere. It's February 23rd, 1945. You're on a volcanic island, crawling across a landscape that can only be described as hell on Earth. This is Hill 362 on Iwo Jima. Now feel the weight on your back. It's 70 pounds of steel, fuel, and compressed gas. All around you, the men you started with, your demolition unit, are gone, either dead or wounded. This isn't just another story about a battle. This is an explainer that digs into the brutal, cold mathematics of survival and how one of the most terrifyingly effective weapons of World War II also became the single most lethal assignment a U.S. Marine could ever receive. You know, this quote from Corporal Woody Williams, a man who would later receive the Medal of Honor for his actions here, it gets right to the heart of it. The M2 flamethrower wasn't a rifle you just pick up, aim, and fire. No, it was a barely contained inferno strapped to your body. Mastering it meant living on the razor's edge of disaster every single day. Williams even told a story of seeing an untrained Marine try to use one. The recoil, the sheer force of it, sent a wave of burning napalm straight back onto the man, killing him instantly. Just think about that. Your training involves a daily dance with death, just to learn how to do your job. And the actual time you had to do that job under fire, well, that was terrifyingly, impossibly short.
7 seconds. Let that sink in. That's it. That's all the time a flamethrower operator had in a fully loaded pack. 7 seconds to get up, expose yourself completely to enemy fire, and neutralize a fortified pillbox that might have an entire company pinned down. And for every single one of those 7 seconds, the brilliant orange flame you're projecting was a giant, unmissable neon sign for every Japanese machine gunner and sniper screaming, "Shoot here! I am the biggest threat on the battlefield." Imagine the pressure. Your entire mission, the lives of the men around you, your very own life. All of it hinges on what you can possibly accomplish in the time it takes to draw a single, deep breath. And here it is, the number that this entire story revolves around: 92%. We have to be really clear about what casualty means here. It's not just a wound you walk away from. It means you were killed, you went missing, or you were so severely injured that you could never return to combat. 92%. That's a number that basically borders on a statistical certainty of not surviving your tour. It's so high it almost seems like a typo, but it wasn't. And this forces us to ask the most critical question of all. Why? What was it about this specific job, on this specific island, that made it so uniquely lethal? The answer, you'll see, lies not just with the weapon, but with the hellish fortress it was designed to break. To truly understand the fate of the flamethrower operator, you first have to understand the ground they were forced to fight on. Iwo Jima wasn't just an island. You could argue it was the single most formidable, brilliantly engineered defensive position in the entire Pacific War. And its design, its very soul, came from a man who knew his enemy all too well. This is Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi. He was different. He'd spent time in the United States, and he deeply respected American industrial power. He knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't win this battle. So his entire strategy was built on one brutal, pragmatic principle: make the cost of victory so horrifically, unthinkably high that America would abandon any plans to invade mainland Japan. So he threw out the entire Japanese military playbook. No more suicidal bonsai charges, no pointless defense at the water's edge. Instead, he let the Marines land. He let them crowd the beaches, thousands of them, and then he unleashed a perfectly coordinated slaughter from a network of hidden inland positions. And this number right here illustrates the sheer scale of his vision: 11 miles of tunnels. Now just pause and think about that. On an island that's only 8 square miles in total, Japanese engineers carved a three-dimensional fortress into the volcanic rock itself. Some of these tunnels ran 75 feet deep. These weren't just crude passages. They were interconnected barracks, command posts, and hospitals that allowed thousands of troops to move, to reinforce weak points, and to attack from unexpected directions, completely unseen. It was a subterranean fortress, a deadly anthill that was virtually immune to the massive naval bombardment the Americans threw at it for days on end. This was the tactical genius that made the fortress so incredibly deadly. Kuribayashi's engineers didn't just build pillboxes, they built a system. Over 600 reinforced concrete pillboxes, and they were all placed so that no single position could be attacked in isolation. It's like a spider's web. If you advanced on one pillbox, you were immediately being fired upon by 2, or maybe 3 others that you couldn't even see. Every single approach was a pre-sighted kill zone. Every square yard of that island was covered by a machine gun or a mortar from multiple angles.
And this brings us right to the central, terrifying problem for the Marines on the ground. All their conventional weapons were failing. Naval guns, heavy artillery, aerial bombs, they were just chipping away at the surface. Standard infantry assaults were resulting in catastrophic, heartbreaking casualties. So what do? How do you solve this puzzle? Well, you have to fight the fortress from the inside out. You have to bring the fire directly to them, into the holes they're hiding in.
Okay, and this is where that brutal calculus we talked about really comes into play. The weapon that was designed to be the key to cracking this fortress was the very same weapon that created an almost impossible equation for the men who had to carry it. Their survival became a matter of grim, terrifying mathematics. Let's really look at the tool for the job here. The M2 flamethrower weighed 70 pounds fully loaded. Just try to imagine moving under heavy fire with that thing strapped to your back. Its effective range was only about 20 meters. That is terrifyingly close. That's practically having a conversation with a fortified enemy position. And like we said, you had a total burn time of about 7 seconds to get the job done. Now the weapon killed not just with fire, but by consuming all the oxygen in an enclosed space, literally suffocating its occupants. It was horrifyingly effective for sure, but every single one of its specifications put the operator in the most extreme danger imaginable. So let's break down exactly how these factors combine to create that insane 92% casualty rate. 1. The close range put them squarely in the kill zone. 2. That flame was a giant "I'm right here" signal to everyone. 3. The 70-pound weight made them slow, clumsy targets. You can't sprint or dive for cover. 4. The Japanese soldiers weren't stupid. They understood this weapon was their greatest threat, making the operator priority number 1. But it's that 5th point, attrition, that is the most insidious. Look, you might survive 1 mission. You might even, by some miracle, survive 5. But over 36 days of constant, brutal combat, engaging dozens of these positions, the statistical probability of you being hit approached certainty. It was never a matter of if, but simply when.
Now, the military wasn't blind to this horrific reality. They tried to solve the problem with technology. They developed the M4 Zippo tank, basically a Sherman tank with a massive flamethrower on it. And it was incredible. It was armored, it had a much longer range, and it carried vastly more fuel. Marine commanders on the ground called it the single most effective weapon they had on Iwo Jima. But here's the tragic reality. Tanks can't go everywhere. The island was full of jagged ravines, volcanic rock, and steep terrain that only a man on foot could possibly navigate. So for countless Japanese positions, the tragic, indispensable, and often fatal solution was still a single Marine with 70 pounds of fire on his back. We've talked about the tactics, the numbers, the technology, but this story is ultimately about the individuals, the young men who were asked to perform this impossible, suicidal task. The numbers are staggering, but it's the human cost where the real enduring weight of this history lies. This account from Private First Class Joseph Rubakovich is just so raw and powerful because it cuts through all the clinical language of warfare. He wasn't some unfeeling machine. He was a young man who had just watched his friends, his brothers, get cut down by machine gun fire from a concrete bunker. His action wasn't just tactical, it was deeply personal. It was fueled by rage and grief and a desperate need to make it stop. That phrase, "a long squirt," sounds almost casual, but it was an act of both grim necessity and the rawest of human emotions. And then there's this. This is the other side of that coin. For Joseph Rubakovich, the war didn't end when the shooting stopped. He carried this photo, taken from a man he killed, for the rest of his life. It was a constant, haunting reminder that the men he was burning out of those caves were not faceless enemies. They were husbands and fathers. He wrestled with the profound moral weight of what he had to do for his entire life. And it shows us that the deepest scars of war are not always the ones you can see. The sheer scale of the battle's cost is just laid bare right here. Almost 27,000 American casualties in just 36 days of fighting. And what is truly unique, what speaks volumes about Kuribayashi's brutal strategy, is that Iwo Jima was the only battle in the entire Pacific War where American casualties actually exceeded those of the Japanese. It was not a victory in any traditional sense. It was a transaction, and the island was purchased with an unbelievable amount of blood. So what do we do with this? What is the legacy of this incredible, terrible sacrifice? How did the hell of Iwo Jima shape the world that came after? Well, it's a legacy of unbelievable courage, for sure, but it's also one that had profound and world-altering consequences. And this right here is the direct link between this one battle and the world that we all live in today. Military planners in Washington looked at the cost of taking one tiny 8-square-mile island, and then they extrapolated what a full-scale invasion of mainland Japan would look like.
The estimates were catastrophic. Some projected up to 1 million American casualties. The ferocity of the resistance on Iwo Jima, the sheer cost, directly informed President Truman's decision to use the atomic bomb. So, paradoxically, the horror of Iwo Jima was used to justify a weapon that would prevent what was seen as an even greater, unimaginable horror. The echoes of this battle are still with us.
Fleet Admiral Nimitz's words, spoken at a flag-raising ceremony on the island, even as the fighting still raged just a few hundred yards away, have become immortal, and they perfectly capture the spirit of what happened there. What does that mean? Uncommon valor was a common virtue? It means that when faced with near-certain death, when the odds were impossibly stacked against them, ordinary men consistently did extraordinary things. For the flamethrower operators walking toward a fortified machine gun nest with a 70-pound target on their back, this wasn't just a fancy phrase. It was their daily reality.
And that really brings us to our final and most crucial point. The historical records show that men like Woody Williams returned to the line 5 separate times to get a new flamethrower after his was destroyed or empty, and then re-engage the enemy. We know that untrained riflemen would volunteer to pick up the weapon when the specialists fell. They weren't suicidal. They weren't unaware of that 92% casualty rate. They could see it happening all around them. So why? They did it because their squad was pinned down, because their brothers were dying. They did it because the mission at that precise moment was more important than their own survival. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What is it in the human spirit that makes someone walk directly into the fire, fully knowing they may not walk back out, for the sake of the person fighting next to them? That, right there, is the ultimate enduring lesson of Iwo Jima.